Today we have a webinar hosted by Kate Hester. We're coming to you from our Boston office today, and we're going to get started right away. No delays here, so welcome, and I'll turn the mic over to Kate.
So as Sue said, my name is Kate Hester. I'm a member of the 4D support team here at Synchro. If you have any questions about how to use Synchro correctly, something that's not working for you, a workflow you want to try out, and you don't know how to go about doing it, or a new idea you have for a new feature or an improvement we could make, feel free to contact us at support@synchroltd.com, and one of the members of the team will get back to you. So with that, let's begin the webinar. So today's topic is on synchronization. We're going to talk about how you do synchronization in Synchro, schedule synchronization in particular, or how do you bring in a schedule, update it, and make those changes from your original scheduling system into Synchro. So I'll start with a typical workflow, bringing in schedules, updating them, linking all of that. I'll talk about the basics of synchronization, what it is and how it works. I'll talk about a few different synchronization workflows which may work, some of them may work better than others for your particular situation. And then I'll do a short demo of a very basic sample project, and I'll talk about the synchronization options. For those of you that have done this before, that's the skip, consolidate, synchronize, integrate options. And then finally, I'll end with some specific pointers for working with Primavera P6, Asta Power Project, as well as Microsoft Project. So the first thing we'll go over is the typical workflow working in Synchro. So for most people, this starts with a schedule in an outside scheduling system, whether that be P6, Asta, or Microsoft Project. You'll create your schedule there, and then you'll import it into Synchro. We work with all of these programs shown here: Asta Power Project, Microsoft Project, PMA NetPoint, Primavera P3, and Primavera P6. All of those can be imported into Synchro using this import menu. You would also import your 3D model. We support over 30 different file types, as well as the universal IFC format. So you import those both, and you'll see your schedule on the top, your list of tasks, their durations, and extra data related to those tasks, as well as your Gantt chart. And then on the bottom, you'd see your 3D model as it was imported from the original CAD system. And then you'd begin to assign your 3D objects to the tasks. So this is the linking process of selecting some objects, selecting a task, and making that connection. And you'd go through that process with all of your models. As you're doing that, you may find you need to refine your schedule. So maybe you need to add new tasks for the purposes of your 4D sequence. So you discover that maybe your scheduler wrote a task called Level 1 Structure, and you want to show each of those. You want to break that down into a little more detail. You want to show different bays of the steel structure going in a particular order to give more information to your stakeholders in the project. You can add those tasks directly in Synchro. You may also find that you want to add tasks purely for the animation purposes, temporary works, equipment, tasks for those that aren't in the original schedule, but you want to show those things in your 4D sequence. So you can add those as well in Synchro. As you're doing this 4D linking process, you may also find errors in your schedule. The obvious example is the gravity problem, where the 4th floor slab is coming in before the 3rd floor columns. You may find errors like that, but you may also find more subtle errors and issues with your schedule, such as too many crews working in the same area, too many tasks going on at the same time, and you realize you need to spread those out to improve the working conditions. You may also be able to make improvements to your schedule. When you have all of your team reviewing this 4D project, you may say, we can really do better here. We can compress the schedule here, or we can change the order around here, and this is really going to flow better for our team. So that's the beauty of Synchro. And when you see this 4D schedule playing out in front of your eyes, you'll be able to make improvements to your schedule. So what do you do when you have those improvements and those changes you want to make? So you can either update the schedule directly in Synchro, like I was saying. Synchro is its own standalone scheduling software, and you can add tasks, edit tasks, change durations, change logic right here in Synchro. And you can also update that information in your original source program, and then you would want to bring that update into Synchro. When you want to bring that update into Synchro, that's called synchronizing. So this is when you've made a change to the outside program and you want to bring it into Synchro, or you've made a change in Synchro and you want to send it back to that outside program. So this is different than simply deleting the schedule that you had there and importing a new one, or just importing again. That's either going to end up with a duplicate copy of the schedule, or you're going to lose all of your connections between that 3D and the schedule. So what you want to do is synchronize rather than import again, and that's just going to bring in those changes. So let's talk a little bit more about synchronization. Stepping away from Synchro for a second, let's think about this in a different way. So you have on your computer a music library. You've imported a bunch of CDs, you've made some playlists, you've organized them the way you like, and you want to send that information to your iPod, your MP3 player. So the first thing you'll do, and you've heard of synchronizing before because we have this button here in our music player called Sync. We're going to import that music from our music library on our computer onto our iPod, and that's the first step. You do the same thing in Synchro. You'll import that data for the first time into your blank file, and at this point they're the same on both your computer and your iPod. You have the same music library, the same playlists at the end of that sync. So then imagine that you go and you get more CDs and you add those to your computer and you want to bring those back to your iPod again. You wouldn't just delete everything that's in your iPod and import it fresh again. You're going to do a synchronize. So what will happen is the new songs, a couple of new songs have been added to your library, maybe some have been deleted, some new playlists have been reorganized. You're going to sync that data into your iPod and it's going to update just the changes, and everything that was there is just going to remain there, and it's just going to bring in those new changes. You could also have the reverse situation where you maybe make a playlist on your iPod and you want to send that to your computer, and that would be pushing data back to your computer. So Synchro provides both options. You can bring your data in from your outside scheduling program, and you can also push data from your program from Synchro back to your outside program. And that's called synchronizing from and synchronizing to, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. So back in Synchro, I want to point out some points about the workflow. So the way this works is you only want to import or export once. So the same way you'll only start with a blank iPod once. You're only going to import all of that data for the first time once, and after that you're going to sync. So you don't want to import twice because you'll end up with a duplicate. You wouldn't import your music twice onto your iPod. You'd have two of the same songs. In the same way with Synchro, you're not going to import again. The next time you're going to go and do a synchronize. And that will bring in the changes but not duplicate the data and not lose those links between your 3D and your schedule. So the difference between synchronizing from and synchronizing to, as I mentioned, synchronizing from is going to pull in data from your outside program, such as P6 or Asta. It's going to pull that data into Synchro. Synchronizing to is sending data, pushing data from Synchro back to that program. So in Synchro, you'll have the navigator on the left side of your screen, and this external data tab will keep track of the data that you've exchanged between Synchro and outside programs. So on the top here you'll see your 3D data, and you'll also see your schedule data below that, separated by the different programs you may be using. So you'll see the name of the project, what the most recent action was, and the date that happened. Below you'll see if it's from P6, you'll see the database name, you'll see the project ID here in brackets, and you'll see the date. So this schedule was originally imported on October 22nd. It was an import activity, and then the latest data will show what's happened since then, and only the latest one obviously will show up there. So on November 10th, this schedule was synchronized from that schedule in P6. I'll just point out a couple tips about synchronization before we get into the details. One of the things I recommend to customers to do before they synchronize their schedule is to create a baseline in Synchro. So originally, these blue bars here, this is the baseline and the red is the current. When you create a baseline, originally the blue bar is going to be directly on top of the red, just an exact copy of the schedule, those dates. And then when you synchronize, you'll see what changes have happened. So you'll be able to see those right in front of you on the screen in the Gantt chart. And you could also play the differences in the 3D window to see how the schedule has changed between the baseline and the current schedule. You can also use the Compare Schedules tool, which is available on the Home ribbon, and that would create a list of objects that have changed between the two schedules. If you save that baseline, you'll be able to do that comparison and print out a list of things that have been changed between the two. I also recommend saving a copy of the SP file before you go to synchronize. And the reason I recommend this is that if you make a mistake when you're synchronizing, there are a lot of different options. If you accidentally choose the wrong one or you misunderstood something, and you discover later on that the schedule didn't synchronize correctly, you can go back to that saved copy of the file before the sync happened and do the synchronization again and continue on from there. So it's just a backup copy just in case you need it. So I'll just talk now about a few different workflows that are available with this synchronization, and which one you use may depend on the situation, may depend on your company structure, and who you're working with. So the first one is a synchronize from only. So in this situation, we're only ever going to pull data down from our outside program and never send data back to it. So in this workflow, you'll create your schedule in your outside program, P6, Asta, Microsoft Project, and then you'll import it into Synchro. At this point, your schedule is the same in both Synchro and P6. And then you'll begin your linking process, your 4D process. You'll link your model to your schedule, and you may make changes to the schedule in the meantime, adding those subtasks and adding tasks for the animation like we talked about before. Meanwhile, over in P6 or Asta, whatever it is, your scheduler may be making changes to the schedule based on change orders, new ideas, new plans, or they're simply updating the schedule for progress as you're out on the site and keeping track of actual dates. So you want to bring those changes in from your outside program into Synchro so it reflects the most current scheduled data. And that's when you'll do a synchronize from. So you'll synchronize from that updated P6 schedule, for example, and bring that into Synchro so that all of that updated data is available in your Synchro model. So this is the most typical workflow for many of our customers, and this is what you may find yourself doing, at least at first. Another option is the synchronize to workflow. So in this scenario, you would be creating your schedule directly in Synchro, and you would be typing your tasks into Synchro and using it as a scheduling program, which we do provide that service in Synchro. It is its own scheduling system. So maybe you're more comfortable in Synchro, but someone is requiring you to create an archive of that in a particular format, such as P6 or Microsoft Project. Someone who wants to be able to open that file on a different program and they don't have Synchro. What you would do is if you create your schedule in Synchro, you can export it to that program for them to open it up. And then you're going along and you're linking up your 4D again, and you're making changes to the schedule, you're making all your edits in Synchro, and then you want to make sure that the person working in P6 or Project, whatever it is, that they have the most up-to-date version. So at that point, you'll synchronize to that outside software. So this is an alternative workflow depending on what program you like to schedule in. And the final workflow is a combination of the synchronize to and from. So both pulling in data and pushing out data to that outside program. So you may create your schedule in that outside program. You'll import it into Synchro again. Begin making your edits and linking up your 3D model. And then you'll synchronize to that outside program. So any changes you made in Synchro, you'll send. And so now, again, they're both the same. Your outside program is matching what's in Synchro. You may then also make changes in that outside program. So this gives you the option to make changes in both. And then you would synchronize from to get that data back into Synchro. So I just want to go through a quick example with a real project, or a real sample project, a very, very basic project, but in Synchro, to give you an example. And I'll go through the first workflow, the most common one. So here we have a model that's been imported into Synchro, that's already in there, and we have no schedule yet. So we're going to start with our schedule in P6, and we're going to import it into Synchro. So here in P6 is our schedule, very basic, 3 tasks. We've got the walls, we've got the roof, and we've got the windows. And they're all 10 days, and they're linked in a chain. So we want to go ahead and bring this schedule into Synchro. So we'll start in Synchro, we'll go File, Import, and we'll go to the P6 option. I'm going to load my database. So for P6, you do need to have access to the P6 database, whether it be on your local machine or on a remote connection somehow, and you'll need your own username and password to be able to enter that. So you'll use those passwords from P6 and you'll connect to your database. In here you'll see all of your project from your EPC in P6. So you'll go ahead and pick the project directly out of the database, and you'll see your project name, your project ID, and the data date here. And go ahead and next. These are all the attributes that are available for import from P6. So you've got tasks, links, costs, calendars, activity codes. All of this information will come in from P6 into Synchro, unless you choose otherwise. So if you know that you are not going to be doing 5D planning in Synchro, you don't need the costs at all, you can go ahead and skip those. And the benefit to that, to skipping something that you know you won't be using in Synchro, is that it does keep your file sizes down. If you have something in P6 that you're not going to use in Synchro, you're welcome to skip it. If there is nothing in P6 and you choose to import it and there's nothing there in P6, it'll just be blank and you won't have to worry about that. So we'll go ahead and import that. It'll give you your progress as it's importing. For larger files, this may take some time, so just be patient with it, and when you're finished, it will give you this output telling you what has been imported and created in Synchro. And you can always select this, copy it to a clipboard, and paste it in a text editor for reference later if you're interested in that. And then go ahead and finish. So here's our schedule, matching exactly as it was in P6. We've got our 3 tasks linked in a chain, and we've got our activity IDs over here. So now we would have this in Synchro, and we're going to begin our linking process. So very basically, let's see, we've got our roof here. We'll select that. We'll make sure we've got an install profile. We'll select our roof task, and we'll go ahead and assign that resource. So I'll move my focus time back to the beginning just to keep track of what I've already assigned. So maybe we'll go ahead, we'll assign our windows, and I'll select that Windows task and I'll assign those. And then I can assign all of my walls. And I'm using a Control-Shift-A shortcut on my keyboard. It's a nice handy shortcut, quick assignment that's been assigned. So now as we drag our focus time through, we can see our project being installed. So first the walls, then we go, here's our roof, our windows, everything being highlighted green as it's being installed, and then the finished product. There it is. So maybe we decide that we want to show the first and second floor walls going in separately to give a little more detail. So we could actually add new tasks in Synchro. So I'm just going to unassign those walls from the original task. So if I move my focus time back to the beginning again, we'll see those walls are not assigned to anything yet. So I'm going to add some tasks here below this, some subtasks, some child tasks for more information. So in the task ribbon, I'll just create a new task as child, and I'll create one more below because we're going to have 2 tasks. I'll call this walls level 1, and I can just drag this down to update that second name. And maybe we'll give these each a 5-day duration. And then we'll link them as a chain with a finish to start relationship. I'll just hit F9 on my keyboard to update that schedule. And now we're back to that original 10-day duration as it came in from P6. So we've added a little bit of detail. Maybe I want to link these walls to the correct task now. A little trick here is if you want to do things by level, we'll go from a side view, and then I'll turn on isometric mode, and I can use window select from top right to bottom left to select all of the walls in that level. And then I'll just, again, Control Shift A assigns those real quick, and do the same thing, the control window box selection for those top level, Control Shift A to assign those. So now we can see the walls are coming in at those separate tasks. Maybe we also want to add a task for this crane, and we want to show that appearing at a particular time. So we'll just give that one a duration, and we can go ahead and assign that crane to that task. So this is a new task we've added in Synchro, and we know that's not in P6, but we've just added it for the purposes of our animation. There's our crane, but it's going to go away at a particular time in our schedule. So now we want to bring in those changes from P6, but we also want to keep the changes that we've made in Synchro. And this is where you have to make decisions about your synchronization. So to begin the synchronization process, you go to the navigator, go to the external data. Here's your project that we imported originally. You can see below all of that data that I talked about, the original name, where it came from, and what time. And then you'll right-click on the project name and choose Synchronize From. Again, you'll connect to your database. Here's your project already selected. Here's its project ID, data date. You know what? I've forgotten. We have to update our schedule in P6 first before we can bring in any changes. So if we go back to P6, here we have our schedule. Maybe we're going to make some changes. We'll delete a task. We'll update a duration of another task, maybe. And then we'll just hit refresh data to commit those changes. Now we can go back to Synchro and bring in those changes. Now there's something to actually synchronize from. So now I'll go same process, synchronize from, connect to my database, choose my project, and here's where I get my options. For each attribute that we originally imported, we have the choices skip, synchronize, consolidate, and integrate. And depending on which one you choose affects the behavior of the synchronization process. I'm going to go into a lot more detail on this, so I'm just going to jump back to PowerPoint to go over these details. So our synchronization options. Here's that window again. Skip, synchronize, consolidate, and integrate. What are each of them and how do they work? So skip. For each attribute, you have the option to choose independently between these 4 options. Skip will say that that attribute is not going to be considered at all. Whatever is in Synchro is just going to be what's kept. It's not going to consider any changes that have been made in the outside program. So if you updated a calendar in P6, if you skip that calendars on synchronization, it's not going to reflect those changes in Synchro. It's just going to keep whatever was originally in Synchro, and it's not going to consider the changes that were made in P6. The synchronize option will completely replace what's in Synchro with what's in your outside program, what's in P6. So if you chose Synchronize for our example, we had 2 tasks that were remaining in our P6 schedule. All of the tasks that were in Synchro would be completely replaced by those 2 tasks in P6. So our extra crane task that we added, those walls, level 1 and level 2, those would be deleted, and we would just go back to matching exactly what's in P6, and we'd end up with those 2 tasks. So Synchronize is going to completely replace what's in Synchro with what's in P6. Consolidate, on the other hand, is going to merge the 2 together. So anything that you've added in Synchro will remain after the consolidation, and anything that you've added in P6 would also be added. Where there are tasks that overlap, such as the roof task that got updated, it went from 10 days to 20 days, the changes to the schedule are going to come from your outside source. So coming from P6, that 20-day duration is going to override the 10-day duration in Synchro for tasks that exist in both schedules. And with Consolidate, nothing will be deleted, so you'll end up with the most tasks at the end. And finally, Integrate. The main difference between Consolidate and Integrate is that in Integrate, tasks that were deleted in your source schedule in P6 will be deleted in Synchro as well. So we deleted that Windows task in P6, that will be deleted in Synchro. But also tasks that were added in Synchro originally, those will remain. So it's merging, but it's taking deletions from your source schedule if they exist. And again, it's taking the data override from the source schedule, so that 20-day duration is going to override the 10-day duration. And this is the most common option, I would say, Integrate. It's also the option you should choose if you are importing multiple schedules from P6. If you have 2 interlinked schedules and you've imported those both, go ahead and choose Integrate, because that will keep track of where the data originally came from and only update the original source file in Synchro. So here we'll just talk about those different options. Here's just a pictorial example of what we're doing. So we started off here with P6. We had those 3 tasks. We imported it into Synchro, and we have the exact same 3 tasks. So this is matching in P6 and Synchro at this point. Meanwhile, in Synchro, we're going to modify. We added those subtasks. We added an extra task for animation. Also in P6, we made some changes. We deleted a task. We changed a duration. And when we go to Synchronize, the option that we choose is going to affect what ends up here in Synchro, whether that's Consolidate, Integrate, Skip, or Synchronize. It's going to change what we result in Synchro. So here's how that works. If we chose Synchronize for tasks, for the task attribute, we're just going to end up with what is exactly in P6. So it's going to replace what's in Synchro with what's in P6. We'll end up with those 2 tasks as they are in P6. If we choose Consolidate, it's going to merge the 2 together, keeping all of the tasks. So we have this task we created in Synchro, this detail we added in Synchro. It's not going to delete this task even though it was deleted in P6, because Consolidate will never delete anything. And it will update the duration of that task that was changed in P6. It will override that in Synchro. The Integrate option is going to update the durations accordingly. Other data that has been changed is going to update that accordingly. It's going to keep our detail that we've added and any extra tasks, new tasks we've added in Synchro, but it is going to delete the task that was deleted in P6. So that's the option that's going to work best for us, this Integrate. We want to make sure all of the changes that were made in P6 are reflected in Synchro, but we also want to keep the changes that we've made in Synchro, new tasks, etc. that we've added, and that's the Integrate option. So before I go on to working with particular systems, let's just finish our example in Synchro. So here we have those options. We know that the only thing we changed in P6 was the tasks. We only added a task and we updated the duration of another task. We never touched the cost, the calendars, etc. So we can actually skip everything else and just make sure we're updating the tasks and the links. So we're going to choose Integrate for both tasks and links. And had we updated other things, we would also want to make sure we chose the right option for them. The benefit to skipping is that it will create a faster synchronization. If you know that data hasn't updated or you're not interested in those updates, skipping it will make the synchronization process faster. So you can just update the things that you know have changed. So we've got integrate for tasks and links, and then we'll hit the synchronize button here. Again, the progress will show you, and then the output will tell you what has been changed. So one task was updated and one task was deleted. We can again copy that if we wanted to, and we'll hit finish. So here's our resulting schedule in Synchro, and you can see the detailed tasks that we've added are still there. The crane task, that brand new extra task, that's still there. And that roof task has updated from 10 days originally to 20 days like it did in P6. And you can also see here the blue coloring, and if we moved our focus time through, you can see that those tasks remain tied to the 3D objects. Obviously, the window tasks was deleted, and so those windows are no longer assigned to anything. So you may at this point go back to your modeler and say, oh, we've decided not to do windows, as ridiculous as that sounds, in this, and they would have to update their model accordingly for you. Or you may go back to your scheduler and say, hey, you deleted a task, we really need that for this model. Whatever happens in your schedule, you'll be able to see that here. And you would obviously need to reassign those to something else or delete them. So that's our example. Now I just want to move on to a few tips for working with particular programs. So P6 first. When you're working with P6, there are a few options that you can set up in Synchro depending on how you want to work with this program. So from the home ribbon, if you click the hammer icon here, it'll bring you to the options menu, and you'll go under synchronization and click Primavera P6. It'll bring up these options. So just in a little bit of detail, you can see here I mentioned earlier you do need to have Synchro installed either locally or on a remote connection, and you'll need to install this integration API file that will get stored on your computer and allows you to connect to that database and exchange data. And that API is available on our website, and we have technical support available if you need help installing that. So some of these options that are available to you. The first one is use activity IDs on synchronization. So that option allows you to synchronize based on the activity ID, the visible activity ID in P6 and in Synchro, rather than what it would alternatively use is the global unique ID, which is a long string of numbers and letters that is not visible in P6. You can't actually see that, but it's a long string that P6 assigns to each task and each object to guarantee uniqueness between files. And so when you work with a copy of a file, if you created a copy of your schedule in P6, those would have different GUIDs, global unique IDs. And Synchro, if it tries to synchronize on those GUIDs, would not be able to do so. So when you are working with copies, you do need to activate this use activity IDs on synchronization option, and then Synchro will use those activity IDs instead of the GUIDs, and you'll be able to synchronize without a problem on those copies. When you do have this option enabled, you do need to make sure that you do not change those activity IDs after creating the tasks. So if you do change that ID, Synchro won't recognize it as the same task, and it would lose its assignment to 3D objects when you synchronize that. Another option is this use WBS code for summary tasks. And this option is available because in P6 you do not have activity IDs for WBS summaries, whereas in Synchro you can. And so what this does is it just simply takes the WBS code from P6 and it uses it in place of a activity ID for those summary tasks in Synchro. When you are using this option, you do need to make sure that you do not change your project ID in P6 because that project ID is appended as the first part of that WBS code. So what we recommend is just to keep some kind of workflow where the project ID does not change in P6. So maybe the project ID number - current. You're always working on the current one, and any archives you save would be project ID - the date or something like that. If you do end up having to change that project ID, you can go into P6, into your database, and just temporarily change that project ID back to what it was when you imported, which you can see in Navigator external data. So you'll see that project ID, and just make sure it's at least temporarily while you're synchronizing. Make sure that that is the project ID of the project in P6 if you have this option enabled. The option Create WBS node for each project on import. This is particularly useful if you are importing multiple schedules from P6, especially if you have interlinked schedules. You'll be able to import those, and it'll insert the project name as the top node of your work breakdown structure, and that way you can roll up the whole project to that node and separate the projects. And the final option I want to point out is this skip detailed schedule on synchronization to P6. So where we added those subtasks, the walls level 1 and walls level 2, those were detailed schedules, subtasks in Synchro. If you wanted to send that data back to P6, but you didn't want to send those subtasks, you just wanted to update durations of the original tasks, you could send that back, synchronizing to P6, pushing your data back to P6, but choosing to not send those new subtasks. So anywhere a task originated from P6 and you created subtasks under it, those would not be sent to P6 when this option is chosen. So that's P6. Moving on to Asta Power Project, just a few quick notes on that. Like P6, you must have Asta installed on your computer, even though it is a file-based system, not a database. You will need a copy of the program on your computer in order to import and synchronize with that program. And that's just because of the way Synchro connects and reads the data from them. The second note here, you always want to work from the same project, not a copy. So what that means is, if you created, project 1 and then you saved as project 2, at this point it would be fine to work from either project 1 or project 2 because they're identical. But if you made the same changes to project 1 and project 2, adding a new task in both project 1 and project 2, it's not guaranteed that those two new tasks would have the same ID. It's the same unique ID in Asta, just the way that they assign those IDs. So if you continue making changes in parallel to two different files, you may end up with different IDs, and those IDs for one task may be for one project may be on a task, and another project it may be on a resource. And so when Synchro tries to update from a different copy of that file, it doesn't know how to treat those IDs. So we recommend just always working from the same project and never working in parallel on two different files. This also means the workflow would be import your schedule into Synchro, and if you're only working on synchronize from, you would make changes to the file in Asta and you would synchronize from, never importing twice, never exporting from Synchro to Asta, or you risk having a copy with different IDs. So just continue working with the same file and you have no problems. You can synchronize on a different computer, so if your colleague also has Asta on their computer and they want to do the update for you, or you have Asta and someone else has created the schedule but you want to do the update in Synchro, you can do that. You can send the files back and forth between different computers. So finally, some notes about working with Microsoft Project. The first thing to point out is Synchro uses an XML format to exchange data with Project, and this is only supported for Microsoft Project. I know that P6 does export an XML file, but it is formatted differently than the XML that would be exported from Project. And so it won't be imported correctly into Synchro. You may even receive a warning telling you that you can't import at all. So again, the XML is only supported for Microsoft Project, not for P6. For P6, you do need to have that installed on your computer, and you need to go through the API process and connect directly to the database. Microsoft Project, on the other hand, does not need to be installed on your computer, unlike P6. You can have just an XML file someone sent you. You can import, export, and synchronize with that. You can synchronize on a different computer, and the file name can change as long as it's the same project with the same IDs. So at that point, the IDs must remain the same. So deleting a task and recreating it, that ID would be changed. Even though it looks like the same task, it would be a different ID on that, and so the synchronization would not work for that task. And another thing to point out for Microsoft Project is there is no Synchronize To option. You would just export, and Synchro would create an XML file which you would be able to open in Project. So that's a basic overview and some more detail on synchronization process in Synchro. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have now.